Everyone who's ever watched Extremely Strange knows that I'm a devotee of the movies. But I'm always interested in where the inspiration for a movie lies, because sometimes that's more fascinating than the film itself. This next story concerns the idea for a movie that started the whole found film genre, and its basis might not be what you think. And it's extremely strange. In the 1600s, witchcraft was declared illegal in the state of Maryland and was considered a felony offense. The grounds for conviction were thus: 1. If two people came forward with an account of witnessing an individual partaking in the dark arts, and 2. If a confession was made by the individual. The problem was, because such activities were performed covertly, the bar was pretty low as far as circumstantial evidence being enough to convict. The Witchcraft Act of 1604 had already put forth that any act deemed to be done in concert with the devil was punishable by death. As a result, anyone could be accused based on religious ideology or deviation from social norms. And while Maryland was founded as a place of religious tolerance, several of these cases went to trial, starting in 1654 and continuing until 1712. In one case, Rebecca Fowler of Calvert County was hanged as a witch on October 9th of 1685. One such individual who lived under constant suspicion was an elderly woman named Moll Dyer, who lived in a modest cabin in Leonardtown. Mary, her real name, was said to have been born in Devon, England in 1634, and first appeared in records in 1669 as an indentured servant in St. Kitts in the Virgin Islands. In 1677, she traveled by Captain Thomas Taylor's ship to Dorchester, Maryland. When Mary arrived, she remained under the servantship contract. As part of her payment for services, the 43-year-old woman was given a small plot of land to live on. Upon completion of the contract, she remained there and farmed her land for sustenance. She was Catholic and a practitioner of African rituals she'd been exposed to during her time in the West Indies. English Catholics often fled to the Americas to escape persecution. Her use of herbs and practice of very odd customs drew the attention of many townsfolk, and it wasn't long before suspicions of witchcraft surrounded her. Previously, it's been said she was considered something of a healer in her small village, with her knowledge of herbal medicine, and that she preferred the company of indigenous people to her own fellow villagers. It's fair to assume, then, that she was sometimes consulted to help with cures or treatment for injury or illness. She was not an attractive woman by any means, and preferred to live sequestered from the rest of the village. Several events made the winter of 1697 a dramatic turning point for Moll, and a series of unfortunate events would lead to her ultimate fate. A young girl was in her care when she died unexpectedly, her parents laying blame on Moll for her death. Then a great epidemic, likely influenza, broke out in southern Maryland. This was accompanied by a very poor crop season and the abrupt deaths of farm animals, which caused grave concern to the people in the area, who were fearful of not surviving the imminent brutal winter. Their fears were well founded, as a great many did not live to see another spring. As a typical religious, puritanical community, they turned to superstition to explain their fate. The starvation, disease, and harsh winter were deemed to be a product of witchcraft. As was typical of a spinster in those times, Moll Dyer became the object of their suspicion during a meeting held in a local church to address their tribulations. It seemed odd to them that somehow Moll had escaped illness and disaster as few others had, and because of their callous rejection of her, had sought revenge on them by casting spells to bring harm upon them. The gathering resulted in a mob being assembled for the purposes of forcing her to leave the village. Moll was asleep when the horde arrived at her shack bearing torches, and proceeded to set it afire, forcing Moll out of her home, through the crowd, and into the woods, having time to only take a light shawl along with her for warmth. Legend said that she then ran for miles, with the sounds of angry townspeople echoing in her ears, until finally collapsing as her aging legs succumbed to pain and exhaustion. Moll soon resigned herself to her fate, as she knew she would not survive the night in the unforgiving elements. She placed her right hand upon a nearby boulder, raised her left, and cast a curse upon the people of Leonardtown to call down suffering from famine, infant mortality, infertility, and unyielding misfortune. It was days later when her body, frozen to the stone, was discovered by a young man searching for lost livestock. It said her hand was still held to the sky, with the indentation of her right hand and both knees pressed into the rock. Hardship and tragedy continued in St. Mary's County, with all of it attributed to Moll. In moments of reflection, many started to believe they had brought the curse upon themselves for treating her so grotesquely, with feelings of guilt spreading among them. Perhaps their remorse was displayed in subtle ways, as they paid tribute to her, with certain places established that would bear her name. The rock on which she died went undiscovered until 1968, when Washington Evening Star writer Philip H. Love read about it in an historical journal and sought to locate it. A grocer who lived nearby claimed to have known about the rock since he was a young boy, and led Love to it. In 1972, the almost half-ton limestone boulder was moved by National Guardsmen from a ravine near the current Moll Dyer Road to the Leonardtown courthouse lawn at the old 1876 jailhouse. A plaque was placed near the rock that read, "Moll Dyer Rock, circa 1697. In a dedication ceremony held in 2021, Leonardtown proclaimed February 26 Moll Dyer Day. The rock was moved from the old jail museum to Tudor Hall Manor, the home of the St. Mary's County Historical Society, where the organization oversees its preservation. A platform and protective covering has been built to shelter the rock from the elements. Since its move, the rock has seen a steady flow of visitors who often leave candy, articles of clothing, and small gifts for Moll. During its relocation from the woods to the old jail, many strange events took place, including some of the National Guardsmen sustaining bodily injuries and cameras failing to work properly. And with this legend came stories of her still vengeful spirit haunting the area, searching for those who drove her from her home and casting death upon her. The supernatural events are said to commonly occur on or near Moll Dyer Road, which is assumed to be either her place of residence or the site of her death. People have reported seeing an apparition on Moll Dyer Road that resulted in frightened drivers getting into car accidents. Calm days often give way to unnaturally thick fogs, with occasional lightning strikes that literally appear from nowhere. And travelers and hikers claim to be overwhelmed by very eerie feelings on the road. Others report seeing shadowy figures and anomalous lights darting through the trees, and many families of the descendants of those who persecuted her still hold Moll responsible when tragedy strikes. When on display in its former location at the old jail, some visitors, perhaps as a result of knowing its sordid past, claim to feel immediately nauseous as they touched it, or experience some type of misfortune after doing so. There are reports of the ghost of Moll herself, seen by hunters roaming the woods, even on the coldest nights. There are also sightings of a white dog that sometimes accompanies her. The Weather Channel show American Supernatural aired an episode dedicated to Moll Dyer, and in it, a woman named Lynn explained how she'd heard the legend that if someone touched the rock, dreadful things would result. Tempting fate, she then claimed that 30 seconds after touching it, she experienced tightness in her chest and felt burning sensations in her lungs. She found it difficult to breathe, and then began spitting up blood during a 45-minute coughing fit. Visitors often found their cameras becoming wonky when trying to snap photos, or complaining of sharp or lingering aches and pains. So it begs the question, does the rock emit divine power, or are those who believe in its power creating it? Moll's story has been the focus of a book and the inspiration for the movie The Blair Witch Project, assuring her a place in both legend and popular culture. Now, much of this story is the subject of legend, and on some level should be treated as such. But Moll Dyer survived wars, famine, disease, isolation, and the harshest of conditions, only to have her life taken by her own neighbors, dying in a time where just being dissimilar to others could result in your death. She was independent, strong, and tough in a way most of us will ever know, and she deserves to be remembered not as a celebrated witch, but as a strong, fearless woman.